What's up, guys? Today we have something kind of different for the channel. Um, Myself and Nick is joining me today. Nick, hello.
Hey, how are you, Derek?
I'm doing all right. We're we typically upload a lot of you know gameplay and stuff to the channel. That's the normal content. There have been a couple of deck profiles, and we're looking into doing more of that kind of thing too. But just in kind of keeping the content going and streaming through, getting people a little bit more just aware of like the NZ card pool in general and how it interacts with the league. We thought a fun thing to do would be to kind of go color by color of all of the cards released so far within the NZ NewZ cards, and just sort of discuss like how good they are within the color, how good they are within the game, and just draw a little bit more attention to some of them individually that I think maybe some people are just missing or haven't dug in too deep enough on their own. Nick is one of the people who have helped playtest the sets as they come out. He is one of he uses them a ton, so he's got a lot of insight on it too. So it just makes sense as a great guest here. Um, we're just going to kind of get started. We've ordered them just sort of in the way they've been released. I'm going to pop a card up on screen, we'll just sort of talk about it a little bit, and then just sort of place it on the tier list. And when we're done, we'll kind of see how everything looks and see what we think. Let's just get started. So up first, we've got the Saiyan Lineage Mastery. Now this is the updated version that was released in NZ6. It used to just be Saiyan style mastery from NZ1, but has had a reboot of sorts. So I'll just read the power here to keep us all involved. But when entering combat, you can reveal a card with Saiyan heritage only in your hand. If you do, and you are the attacking player, your opponent draws one less card. If you reveal a card with Saiyan heritage only and you are the defending player, your opponent skips their first attack or attacks phase. Your Saiyan style attacks deal +1 power stage and +1 life card of damage. So Nick, what do you think? Where do you think this goes?
Well, for me, the first thing that jumps to mind, of course, is Goku Young again. Uh, I jokingly call this the Goku Young again mastery. You use his power to go get a Saiyan Heritage Only card, and then you use this to activate its effects. It does one thing that no Saiyan mastery really does, and that's it adds damage to your attacks, which is something we don't see any Saiyan mastery do that it makes sense that they should be doing. Also, the aggression that the Saiyan style usually plays with is really helpful. You're like wanting to enter combat a lot. You're wanting to do a lot of attacking. So your opponent drawing one less card. We've seen how powerful that can be in other effects.
Yeah, I agree. And I think another, you sort of touched on it a little bit with Goku Young again, and just doing things that other masteries don't do. I think one of the things that this does, that Goku Young again at least allows you to do, is you can enter as the defender, grab a, say, an heritage only card. They skip their first phase, and then you can, have some number of combat ending effects, which we all know exist in abundance in this game,
Hmm.
and find your way out of combat, which is also not a typical sort of Saiyan styled palette. So I think this mastery just opens up a lot of things that Saiyan doesn't normally get to do, um, and I think that's pretty neat. What do you think that grades it at, Nick?
I would put this card at A tier. I do think the power buff is super important, and just the control you can have when entering combat, either as the attacker or defender, is so big. A lot of ball control type decks will like to will enter on you when they think they can seal the game, and stuff like this gives you another turn to try to get one on them, or like you stated, you can use a combat enter against a beatdown deck and just get out of there if you drew some nons or some not good cards. So its versatility is huge, and I think that puts it in A tier.
Yeah, that's right about where I would put it too. I think it's less flashy just on paper than something like draw two cards. So I think sometimes it gets maybe a little overlooked comparatively to just like how great like Self Saga Mastery is, or even Trunk Saga for the decks that want it. But I think it just does enough unique stuff to be just like generically a good mastery. I think it's very playable.
For sure.
A feels good to me too. Up next, then, another card from the first set, Saiyan Body Crush. You want to read this one for us, Nick?
Yeah, so this is a Saiyan Heritage only card. Plays well with the previous mastery. Physical doing +3 stages of damage. If successful and the personality performing this attack has a higher power rating than the defending personality, then for the remainder of combat, your opponent's attacks cost an additional 2 stages to perform. Remove from game after use.
Yep. Now, as anyone who's been around the league for a minute knows, this card's seen a couple of power downs since its original version, which was admittedly, cracked. But this version, I think, has balanced out to be a much fairer card. Maybe at the expense of it being, an S tier card or something. But I think it's still playable in the decks that would want it. I think the number of decks that like really will care are a little limited. I mean, it's just kind of a generically good thing to make your opponent's attacks cost more. But the sort of Saiyan stage lock archetype isn't particularly wide. Future Gohan and stuff like that are really famous for it. But Broly can use this kind of thing and stuff too. Being in Goku, you can obviously fetch it. I don't know. I think this card is, at least in its current state, I think it's probably B.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I mean, in the decks that want it, I mean, I played this in the Future Gohan deck in several events here, and it is extremely strong in that deck. And being able to fetch it with Broly level 2 or with Goku Young again and some things like that, very strong, very situationally powerful, but it does feel like a B card to me.
Cool. Yeah, and don't take a card being like B rated or anything as like it not being good. The Saiyan card pool especially is just full of good stuff. When you have to like put this up against Saiyan B for something, like there's just obviously a difference in how good that is versus this. I still think this card is great, and like Nick said, the decks that will use it will use the hell out of it. But I just think the overall effectiveness of it is a touch narrow.
Mhm.
But Saiyan Execution then comes next. This is another one that's seen a little bit of a nerf from its earlier days, but it's also Saiyan Heritage only. Plays nice again with the Mastery. Energy attack doing 5 life cards of damage. Raise your anger 1 level. Empower 2 is good. Remove an opponent's ally in play from the game. Then you can pay an additional X power stages for this attack. For every 2 stages paid, discard an additional ally. Remove from the game after use.
Okay, so when I look at this card, I'm immediately reminded of Saiyan Keyball, which is a very similar effect. It's not Saiyan Heritage only, and you can discard up to 3 allies. So I think this card is better than Saiyan Keyball, and the main reason is the first line of after the Empower, the remove an opponent's ally and play from the game. Remove is so much stronger than discard in every single scenario, especially when it comes to ally decks. And then, if you're at full, you can get a lot more than 3 allies out of this if you need to. So
Yeah,
this can be a really powerful effect. You can nerf some allies with this. And you know what? If they don't have any allies, then it's an energy for 7 that raises your anger 1, which is just fine base level on a card for sure.
absolutely. And then another little sort of it wasn't as relevant when NZ1 first dropped, but now, especially 5, 6 sets into NZ, we have leaned a little bit more into sort of the Saiyan ally deck as like an archetype that wasn't really pushed in vanilla score, and using this to as an option to get yourself to 0 or 1, to be able to turn your allies on, I think is just uh, is an understated value of this card. Obviously, being able to remove a bunch of guys is really really strong, and is the primary use for it. But like we know in with black and stuff like that, where they have similar effects,
Hmm.
it's just used to turn allies, and I think that's something that this card still does really well.
Absolutely. It fits in most Saiyan decks, and if you're a searching deck, it's certainly a good bullet card. And if you're not, I mean, energy decks obviously want it. The Buu Saga decks that are about anger want it. It pretty much has a fit in most Saiyan decks.
Yep, I agree.
That's why I think it's an A tier card. I think you could make an argument that it's borderline S tier. I think the card is very good. Its versatility and like I said, if you're playing against allies, if you're playing with allies, if you care about anger, it can do all the things. So it's definitely an A tier card, and it feels quite good at A tier.
I think so too. That's pretty similar for me. Do you think it's you know uh, just flatly A? Do you think it's better than Lineage?
I do think it's better than Lineage. I think it, like I said, it's versatility and the fact that there's basically every Saiyan deck is going to at least be considering putting this card in it, if not having at least a one or two of as a target for different search effects.
Yeah, I think so too. I think this one for me really, really pushes the like boundary of SA.
Absolutely.
Dangerous sentence there. Um, of A and S, we'll go that way. And especially because, I mean, from where it came from, that would have been wildly S, but I think the even where it's at is still incredibly strong. Here's this next one, though, is a little bit divisive. Saiyan Gogeta's Rapid Fire is another Saiyan Heritage only card. Uh, still searchable. Focused energy attack. If successful, draw a card. If used by a fused personality, this attack deals an additional +4 life cards of damage, and your opponent's personalities in play lose X power stages to a minimum of 0, where X equals the number of cards in your hand when you perform this attack for the first time. So there's a whole bunch of text on this card, starting with if used by a fused personality, that typically means next to nothing. So if we just ignore that for now, pretend it's a 2-sentence card. Focused energy attack. If successful, draw a card. And Saiyan Heritage only, I guess, is an important part of that too. Still being fetchable in the situations where it matters. That alone, I think, makes this a playable card.
Yeah, I mean, there's a card from Cell Games right now, I believe, that is a focused energy for 3 if successful, draw a card, and that sees play. And this is just strictly better than that card. So
I was just going to say that card was, to this day, still played semi-regularly in Saiyan decks. And I think that this, is just, well, it's one extra life card. It's fetchable now. I guess that one's Saiyan Heritage only too, I think. So, but either way, that alone makes it pretty good. And then if used by a fused personality, getting to do some extra damage, and they lose some stages too, which is technically just more free damage on top of that.
Yeah, so all of these affects the suite of Gogeta cards. This one is one of the ones that's the best on its own. Like as a vanilla card, focused energy if successful, draw a card. It's a powerful effect. It's not overly powerful. It's not breaking the game or anything. But like you're gonna play this card, you're gonna be happy with it. And then as usual with these effects, the if used by a fused personality, the card is incredibly strong. It's gonna be the best card in your deck if you can consistently fuse.
Yep. And I think Saiyan does like a reasonable job of that with some of the support that they've gotten. So I think that this card fits in like just fine into a deck that wants to do that, and very well into decks that don't. I think it's at least a B.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a B. Like I said, there's nothing spectacular about it, but focused attacks are good, and drawing cards is good, and drawing cards is very on style for Saiyan for sure.
Yeah, I agree. B feels good. Next up, one that is less divisive, one that everyone likes. Saiyan Cross Block. What does this one do, Nick?
So it has Endurance 1, which Endurance is always great. Saiyan Heritage only, stops a physical attack, raise your anger 1. If you declare it a Tokawaza, you may remove 3 Saiyan style cards in your discard pile from the game to draw a card, removed from the game after use.
So, I mean, there's not a lot of introduction that needs. A block that gives you anger and draws a card.
Yeah. So the major thing I see when I see this is that I do not think that Saiyan has a good physical block, period, in the score game. The best ones are like, your opponent loses 4 power stages, which is fine, but like that's not a strong effect. Raise your anger 1, again, there's a lot of Saiyan decks that are trying to level at this point, and then the ability to draw a card obviously is super strong. I think that this is the best Saiyan physical block there is. I think that you should play it as a 3 of in every Saiyan deck that you play. So I think it's an S tier. I don't know what else you could ask this card to do.
Yep, I think as far as a block goes in a color that especially doesn't have like a great block on its own, this is cream of the crop. This is the by far the easiest S on the list for me. Well, next one might be cheating a little bit. So, Saiyan Negation. Anyone that's been around the NZ space here knows that the negation cycle, each color got one, and they are all great. Sphere is already a good card, and this is Sphere in your color. Stop the effects of any combat card. Use when needed. There you go. That's the text on Trunks Energy Sphere. But these also have some additional effect for being part of your Tokuwaza. So if you declare to Tokuwaza, your Saiyan style attacks deal +2 power stages of damage for the remainder of combat, and your opponent's personalities lose 2 power stages. Limit 1 per deck, remove from game after use. So you only get one of these as opposed to the 3 spheres or 4 in trunks or whatever. For good reason, all these cards are snapped. Uh, they are. Most of the time, I don't think there are a ton of people playing 3 spheres and a negation or whatever. This ends up typically just being the last slot of however many spheres you're playing. But everyone is going to play this in their same deck. Everyone is going to play the red one in the red deck, etc. They're all just great. You're just going to use it. This one especially does all the things Saiyan wants to do. Does more damage, makes your opponent lose stages. I mean, I just good, just great.
Yeah, and notably, it does not say to a minimum of 0. So if your opponent's at
Yeah.
0, you'll get some life cards out of this sometimes. I mean, it's an incredible effect. Obviously, for those of you who are new to NZ, deck building wise, like Derek stated, normally you end up with 2 spheres and 1 negation in your deck. You you don't want to add, you don't want to go to 4 most of the time, but the negations are always going to be the best sphere that you have, and as you can see, it buffs the stuff like Derek said that Saiyan needs buffed. So it's just a great card.
Yep. Yeah. If cross block is an easy S, this one is at least as S, if not more so.
Yeah.
Then we have Saiyan Surprise Support. Now this is another one that was rebooted with the last release. This one originally came out in NZ3, but was a little undercooked when it first dropped. But it has used immediately after taking damage from an attack. You may place an ally from your hand or discard pile into play at 4 power stages above 0. Choose an ally you control. That ally can gain control of combat this turn, regardless of your MP's power stage. Draw a card, remove from the game after use. What do you think about this, Nick?
Well, so it does allow you to kind of sneak some stuff into play. Being able to get an ally from your discard pile is pretty useful. Use when immediately after taking damage also importantly means that it does not take up your attack or attacks phase to activate this card, which is great.
Yeah.
Choose an ally you control. That ally gains combat this turn. Well, it does not say it had to be the ally received by this card. So it gives you a lot of options for what you're going to do. You can choose you can put an ally in play and choose a different ally. You can go get one to put into play. Or if you don't even have an ally to put into play, but you have one in play already, it can take over too. So all of that's pretty good. It also replaces itself, which obviously anything that replaces itself has a decent little bar in and of itself. I mean, I still think it's probably a C tier card. I mean, it can border on B maybe, depending on the right deck. I mean, if you're playing a lot of allies, this card's going to be fine. You're going to be happy with this card. It's gonna set you up for some very nice turns. It can also do some things like set you up to fuse, which again we talked a little bit about. Saying getting a little bit into the fusion game with the focused energy attack and things like that. Being able to just go, oh, okay, I'm going to get a Gogeta fusion card from my discard pile, and then I'm going to draw a card with this and then activate his ability to fuse. And now you just have Gogeta in place. So some really strong
Yeah.
effects you can get out of this. Anything to add to that, Derek?
No, I mean you kind of covered it all. I think that this, especially from where it came from, this card has jumped a lot. The previous version, I think, was like probably even pushing unplayable, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that's shooting my own self in the foot a little hard, but I think this new version is very useful. Like Nick mentioned, one of the things that's sort of missed a lot with this card is that you don't even need the ally in play, or you don't even need to be able to play an ally to get the rest of the effect of this. So that's pretty great. C feels good to me though because it's still sort of a narrow situation. I think any of these cards of this like variety, this sort of like use when something happens, unless it's Sphere, of course, because that one is a pretty uniquely great situation. But the ones that are like use after taking damage, use after your opponent draws a card or whatever, like they just require a certain situation to happen, and you have to have this in your card or this card in your hand, and you have to have the card that it can like affect. There's just a lot of like puzzle pieces you got to get to line up for this to be as great as it can be. So I think that drops it a little bit in sort of overall value, but I think that still does enough. Even just replacing itself is good. Um, C feels very safe for me on this one. Then we have Saiyan Dual Rushdown. You want to tell us what this one does, Nick?
So Saiyan Dual Rushdown is a physical for +2 stages. If successful, draw a card. So right there on its own, that's just fine. If you have at least one ally in play, this card performs another physical attack doing +3 stages of damage immediately after the first one, using one of your allies' power ratings instead. Removed from game after use. I'll let you talk about this one.
Yeah, so right off the bat, as we know with Saiyan's big thing is card advantage, or at least action advantage. Saiyan does more things than you most of the time. That's just sort of its thing. So this one being an attack that is another attack, which means it's 2 actions on 1 card, is already good. Plus it draws you a card, so it's 3. Um, the second attack is bigger than the first one, or potentially, at least if assuming your ally isn't just like wildly weaker than you or something. Um, I think this card is. I think this card's fantastic. This card is arguably probably almost too good. It does take a little bit of work to set up, like having an ally in play or whatever. But there are some decks that this is just like super strong in NZ. In Turles, where you sort of just start the game with your Crusher Core in play. Or well, you don't start the game, but I mean, you're only going to South got him into play right away. So this is like live from turn 0. Future Gohan with his attached trunks that can't go anywhere. This is crazy good in that deck. So there's a ton of times that this is just like already online without any effort whatsoever. So that's cool. And then the decks that do have to try a little harder, I think it's still incredible in.
Yeah, I mean, if you're playing, 1, 2 allies in your deck, you're going to put this card in your deck every time. Physical for +2, if successful, draw a card is just good enough to play.
Yeah.
Anytime you get both of the attacks, I mean, it just feels way too strong. This card is great. I mean, I think it's clearly S tier. I think it's one of the best Saiyan physical attacks in the game now. I'm a big fan of this. It makes me want to play allies in decks that don't need allies because of how good this and the following card are.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. And then speaking of that next card, Saiyan Teamwork Blast. Transform, Saiyan Heritage only. Energy attack doing 3 life cards of damage. If you have at least 1 ally in play, this attack stays in play to be used 1 more time this combat. If this attack is performed by an ally, it does an additional +4 life cards of damage. Removed from game after use. So there's a little bit of sort of nuance baked into the text of this card. Being used the second time or whatever, it's not like Dual Rushdown where you have to use the ally's power or whatever the second time. This one is just an energy you can use twice if you have an ally. If you have your ally perform the attack, even if it's the first time you're using it, it gets the +4 life cards of damage. So it could be an energy for 7 right off rip and then stay on table to be used a second time at 7. It's just like a huge amount of damage baked into this card. And even if it's not, even if you use it as 3 the first time to get yourself low enough to let your ally use it the next time, you're still getting 11 life cards of damage out of this. What is it? 10 life cards
10.
of damage. I apologize. Did my math a little wrong. You still getting 10 life cards of damage out of a single card. I just think this card's awesome. And Transform, I mean, lest we forget Transform, meaning you can just pull it whenever you need it. So you can pull it when you do have the ally. I think this card's awesome.
Yeah, the transform certainly adds the versatility to the card because you just pass, you put it in your discard pile, and then when the time comes where your ally's out, you can bring it back and do loads of damage. I mean, being able to do an energy for 7 twice is so strong, and or if you're just an ally deck, you just need energy attacks you can use multiple times. This is great for that. If you're playing the Buu Saga Mastery where every attack gains you anger and stuff, this is great for that. Like it fits in most of what Saiyan does. Maybe a little weak in the Cell Saga draw a bunch of cards deck, but overall I think this card is extremely powerful. I mean, it definitely BA level tiers. What are your thoughts on the tier?
So I think whereas Dual Rushdown is an obvious S, being just as free as it is. Teamwork Blast does require a tiny bit more effort, and just in being an energy attack in general, just makes it a little worse than a physical
Mm-hmm.
or off rip because sometimes you just can't play this card. Um, so I think that that for me puts it to like A as a cap. The number of times though that you do set up like a full like ally thing to be able to use this effectively is a little bit limited. I know we have pushed Saiyan into trying to like want to be an ally deck, or at least have tried to encourage that a little. So it's definitely more likely that it could have been in a vanilla store setting. I still question if it's like fully A powered, just because of the setup and being an energy. But I could see it being maybe bottom of A, top of B, but it's in that sort of range for me. Do you have anything more
Uh,
concrete?
I mean, I tend to agree with where you're at. It feels like most of the time when I see this card in play, it you get one of each. You get a 3 and you get a 7, which is pretty
Yeah,
good overall. With it not drawing a card, and you do have to have the ally to get the second bonus effect on it. It's probably a B tier, but the transform does help a lot. I mean,
yeah,
if you haven't
that's
played with transform yet, yeah, transform definitely increases the power level of every card that has transform on it.
yes, absolutely. And real like maybe to um, sing my own praises here a little bit with the NZ cards. The cards that transform are just so fun to use. Even if they're all just better by having it, but it's so fun with what you can set up. The sort of toolbox you can kind of build in your discard pile as
Hmm.
the game goes on. The tools you can pull back to yourself when you need them is just really cool. It also just it like really encourages you to be more aware of your opponent's discard pile. Be where like you need to run things like prep crash and stuff more often just to be able to counteract the fact that these kind of effects exist. And I think cards in general, mechanic wise, that require players to adapt to how they play. Just interesting design space. Sorry to derail that a little bit into how
Anything
cool this
with
card.
interaction is great. And another thing this does is with your own deck building, it makes you remember, hey, I'm going to play this transform energy combat. I need to make sure I got enough energy combats in my deck. So,
Yeah,
you'll look at things like that you never would have looked at previously, like whether it's a physical or energy combat and things like that, because you'll be
yep,
surprised at some of the scorecards that don't fit what you thought they might have been. So,
yep, agreed. And for anyone here who's watching the video who's just not familiar with transform, what transform is if this card's in your discard pile, you can discard a card from your hand of the same style and card type to play this card from your discard pile. So if this is in there, you just discard a Saiyan energy combat card. It doesn't have to be an energy attack, just an energy combat, and it will let you play this card from your discard pile as though it was in your hand. So, like Nick said, just the things that you have to consider when building a deck, I think, are just fun design space to work around. But overall, I think, staying on track a little bit here, I think this is probably a B for me.
yep, I'm on board.
Throw her in the B's. Ooh, we're up to another ministry. This is another one that got changed with the last NZ set that was released. This one was not a power level buff or whatever in the ways that some of the other sort of remaster cards were from the set. This maybe one or two other cards in the updated release were sort of just functional erratas to power them down to kind of a level where we had intended them to be. I'm going to read over this one first and we'll get a little bit more into that. But once per combat, during your defender defense phase, you may discard an ally you have in play to stop a physical or energy attack. Your Saiyan style attacks deal +1 power stage of damage for each ally in your discard pile to a maximum of +5. At the end of your rejuvenation step, you may place an ally from your remove from game pile on top of your discard. Now, I'm just going to start a little bit with like just a super brief history of this card. Originally, it didn't have a cap, and there was just a little bit of things that were different about this. And one of the things in designing it that we were like kind of nervous about was what if someone just plays like 25 allies in their deck? Um, like that's just a ton of free blocks. It's a ton of free damage buff. That's like probably too good, right? I don't know, maybe. And so as we were testing it out a little bit, we were just kind of finding that most people were still just using it in the sort of 7, 8, 10, whatever ally range that like an easy Warriors Gather deck would play. And so you're like, okay, so it's just going to be fine. But then in doing a little more testing, especially with NZ6, where some of the cards were mixing stuff up a little bit with some of our ideas, we did find that, as we thought, dumping a ton of allies into this deck uh, does suddenly make it really, really good. So we had to put a cap on it a little bit. It hadn't been like performing too strong or anything, but I think it was just something that like hadn't really been caught or thought of like the community space, and we had just known that we were worried about, and then was proven to us was worth worrying about. So we powered it down a little bit. That said, what do you think about it now, Nick?
Well, so the discard effect is certainly still very strong to uh, stop an attack. Anytime you can get a free block is pretty good. The Saiyan style attacks, it's really easy to get up to 5 in these kind of decks. You're still probably going to be in the 10 to 12 ally range. So, there's a lot of ally hate floating around, a lot of good cards that have discard your opponent's allies attached to them. So it's not that hard to get this to do +5, and if all your attacks are doing +5 stages, that's a pretty strong effect. At the end of your rejuvenation step, you can place an ally from your RFG pile on top of your discard. That's super relevant for the decks that care about a specific ally more than the rest of them. And even if you don't, it just adds to your buff. It tries to keep you closer to that maximum of 5. Um,
Yep.
I think this card does encourage you to play allies. Obviously, the first thing that came to mind with me when I saw this is Cell. The Cell Juniors being able to discard to stop an attack and then use their search ability to bring back the guy that just stopped the attack. That's a strong effect, and every time somebody sees the Cell Junior deck, they're quick to attack. So there's a lot of things you can do with this mastery that are really neat. It's definitely a different design space for Saiyan decks than Saiyan is used to, which I know was the main goal. I think it's an A tier mastery. I think there's a lot of cool things you can do with it. I'm not sure that it has the overall power level that the Cell Saga mastery has, but this brings a new deck building for Saiyan that it's never really had before, and it certainly is interesting, and it's a really cool effect.
Yeah, that's kind of like right where I'm at with it too. I think that um, a big point that you mentioned with it is that it just makes Sand try to do something it doesn't normally do, and maybe that's not like great for its like overall power level per se, as far as like hearing or whatever. But it just makes for a really interesting card, I think. That said, though, the +5 is the biggest flat buff of any ministry in the game. I mean, we already know that like Black Chunk Saga is great because it's +2/+2.
Mhm.
And that just gets played a lot because that's just generically 4 damage. Now, obviously, that's easier to set up than this one, but the fact that with a little bit of work, you could be doing more overall damage modifier than that mastery is nothing to ignore. I think this card is probably at least A as well. I think it's still very playable, even powered down. I think it's just a lot closer to like what we kind of envisioned for its power level. I still think you would the decks that will just want to punch face are still probably just going to pick Cell Saga or whatever, like they always would. But this just encourages you to try something different with Saiyan in a way that's not just um, I'm doing something different to do something different.
Mhm.
There have definitely been cards like that. I mean, we've seen that with like most of NZ2's fusion support cards or whatever, where you're like play fusion, and all the cards are like no. So I don't think it like sacrifices being good in a way that like I don't think it's trying to be interesting at the cost of being good. I think it's still a very playable card. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, I think A feels safe to me. Do you like this today?
Yeah, I definitely like it today. I do think it's a very strong mastery. Does a lot of cool things, and you'll be surprised at how much damage it actually turns out over the course of a game.
Yeah, and like +5 is the cap or whatever. But even if you're just doing like saying dashing
Destiny.
kick for +2 or 3, or destinies for +2, or dual rushdowns for +2 or 3, like that adds up so much so fast. Uh, yeah, chip damage like that is always good.
Yep.
And we've got Saiyan Power Burst. You want to tell us what this one does?
All right, it is a Saiyan Heritage only energy attack doing 3 life cards of damage. It has Empower 3, or if you declare Tokuwaza and you have no allies in play, you may play a level 1 ally from your discard pile at 3 above.
Okay.
So
What?
this card has a definitely an interesting effect. It's obviously on the ally theme. It's Saiyan Heritage only, which plays in well with the masteries and stuff like that. So on its base, we're talking an energy for 6 life cards, which is pretty below par for just, kind of a base damage attack. If you declare Tokuwaza, you have no allies in play, you can play a level 1 ally from your discard pile. Okay, so if you're playing the ally deck, the teamwork deck, this is the kind of card you might consider in that deck. You're looking to bring your allies back. Oh, I used him to block this attack phase or this defend phase. Now it's my attack phase. I'm going to play this. I'm going to get him back into play. Uh, it feels pretty strong in a lot of those scenarios, but I think the overall power level of the card is fairly low. I think you need very specific things for it to work. Um, I tend to lean into C tier where it's like, okay, the deck that wants it, it's probably fine in that deck. And, if I'm playing generic Saiyan, probably not really that interested. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm in a similar spot. I think another thing that it does like sort of cool is it does function nicely with the fusion deck concept where you have like one specific ally that you care about, and if it gets removed before you can do something with it, you can pop him back into play and try again.
Mhm.
So that's like a merit point for it. But overall, energy attack for 3 cost 2 is not good. Energy attack for 6 cost 2 is whatever. I mean that's a Saiyan or that's a Frieza Saga vanilla energy attack.
Mm.
So overall, I think like that's probably real forgettable. But like you mentioned, being able to play this, bring an ally into play from your discard pile, teamwork it to block the next attack. Um, Being able to get like 2 blocks that way with one ally is pretty cool. Using the ally to block a physical that would allow you to then keep enough stages to do this is pretty neat.
Mhm.
So I think there's like use for it, and like you said, the decks that will care, I think, will probably like it. But even then, to be honest, I worry that it's like maybe not going to make the cut if in your deck. I think you might try if you're like I'm really trying to get these like neat NZ cards into the deck or whatever. Maybe you'd like be more inclined to try it. But overall, I think even in just like a regular ally deck, I don't know. I think with as many allies as you have to use in the deck and stuff, I think this one might still maybe miss the cut. And if it doesn't miss, then maybe it's like a 2 of or something.
Yeah,
Um, to me, like low C or even like high D feels right.
could
I
definitely
think at
see
least
that.
comparatively to other things within the style, even it's like less impressive than that. It does something kind of cool, but not often enough or strong enough to like really be flashy.
Yep. Nope. I mean, I agree. It's hard to, play an ally deck, and then this card you have to have no allies in play to get the effect, and it has to be in your discard pile. It's tough to make work, and even when it works, it just kind of feels okay.
Yeah, yeah. If this card had like I don't know transform or something, it would like jump a couple of brackets. But I think just with as limited of a situation where you have to make it actually fully powered, I think is tough. For me, I think I might even say like top 50.
Okay. Yep.
So far, it is like definitely my like least favorite of the cards.
Absolutely.
Well, then we have Saiyan Turles' Kill Driver. This one is an energy attack with Empower 3. Already more damage than the last attack.
Hmm.
But if successful, for the remainder of combat, if a card effect would require you to discard an ally you control from play, you may remove an ally in your discard pile from the game instead. So, off rip, there's just some obvious synergies with the Teamwork Mastery. This came out in the same set as that Mastery, so it makes sense that this is a card that like goes in the deck. Uh, Energy attack and power 3, 7 damage, whatever, fine, okay. But being able to like block an attack with by discarding an ally, as we talked about with the mastery, is already pretty good. Being able to do that without getting rid of another ally, you can discard an ally to block one attack, and then you can use this as the action after that, and then the next attack you can block by removing the ally you just discarded. Um, that's pretty sweet. So again, it's another one like the last card where you can kind of get 2 blocks off of one card, and then with the mastery effect, End of turn, you can bring the card you removed with this back into your discard pile to kind of keep your mastery turned on. That's neat. Um, an understated thing with this one, of course, being Turles named, you can run 4 of it if you really cared. And Turles is level 3, which I think is like one of the big like powerhouses of his uh, stack. I think is 1 and 3. And really, I think all 3 of them are like pretty cool. But his 3 does have a really strong power where it does more for every ally removed from the game. So you can kind of set up your own with that by using Turles's or using Teamwork Mastery to discard all of your guys, then use these to remove them for extra blocks, and then finally turn them into a giant bomb on his level 3. Like, there's cool stuff to be done with that. It takes a lot of setup, and it takes a very specific, I'm playing the Turles teamwork deck for it to like really be fully powered. But I think that if you are, that's a cool thing to do. But otherwise, it's just an energy for 7 most of the time. Sometimes, double block with the mastery is kind of cool. But I don't think you'll ever play this if you're not playing teamwork.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, energy for 7 is obviously a better spot to be in than energy for 6. It's weird that one extra card makes so much of a difference, but it really does. Otherwise, if successful, remainder of combat. If any card effect, right? So that's an important effect. It's if your opponent's trying to discard your ally, or if you're trying to use teamwork mastery, you can just say, okay, I'm going to use teamwork mastery. I'm not going to discard my ally. There's some cool things you can do with it for sure. I do think it's super narrow. The Turles deck that you described is going to have a lot of allies to make it work, but it definitely can work. And getting Turles to level 3 to use the power to make for the big attack is definitely strong. So, I mean, there are some things you can do with this that are strong, but I do think that overall it's super narrow, and even when it's good, it's just kind of okay. So,
Yep.
I think this is kind of a standard D tier card in that, if you're playing the very specific 1 or 2 decks that would like this card, like it's probably going to be okay in those decks. Energy for 7 again is a good enough bar that it's okay, but
Yep. I think it's better than Power Burst. Just because it's, I mean, even at its worst, it's just more damage.
absolutely.
So I think it's just better than that card. But I still think it's just an extremely narrow angle. I think it's still like an interesting deck to like try to build or whatever, but I don't think it's particularly competitive or anything.
Hmm.
I mean, sometimes that just like sort of happens with some of the NZ cards where they like we're aware that it's like not every card is a home run as far as pure power level. Sometimes they like truly exist to just make you like play a unique deck for some pickup games. And that like I think that's okay as far as like design space goes. Sometimes it's fine to just have like this is a kooky little deck, play it. Um, if you just want to like have some fun, and I think this is like textbook that card. Um, oh, I'm playing Turles deck with Teamwork Mastery to try to pull off the get to level 3, punch you for a bunch. Like if you want to try to set up like that little Exodia combo, then I think this is like a cool card to put in it. I would run 3 or 4 of it if I were like really trying to do that.
Hmm.
But again, that's exactly one deck that really cares to have it, and I think that just means that like I don't think it can be any higher than probably D. You're playing it in one kind of meme deck, and that's about all I. That's about all you can say for it, I think. Now this next one came from NZ5. Within NZ5, there were some cards that NZ5 was called Resurrection, and the kind of theme of that set was there were some cards that were just like support for things, but about half the set was cards that were originally released by Retro as part of their virtual subsets that were played at like Gen Con. And we don't allow those cards in general within the league. We had them like legal for like a very brief period of time, and we ended up kind of cutting them from the pool and just sort of going with our own like fresh angle as it was sort of built with this league in mind, with the way the meta is kind of shaped here and things like that. It just kind of made more sense for us overall. And with as time has gone on, I think that's like proven more and more true. But as we went through those cards, like there were still a handful of them that were like really interesting or did cool stuff, that encouraged. Or I think that like could be encouraged to be legal within the game. So when we were making NZ5, we really were thinking, okay, well, what of these makes the cut? Is like if we're going to pull 20 of these into the game, which of these are going to be that? And this was one of those cards. Its effect, endurance 2, energy attack doing 3 life cards of damage. If you declare the Tokawaza, this stays on the table to be used 2 more times this combat. Now, anyone that knows anything about the game can just kind of read that and tell that this is Saiyan Majin Saga Mastery support. You just play it with that. You get 3 anger, you get some stages. It's just good. Some endurance is always fine. You can milk 9 damage off of this card if you can pull it off every time. That mastery is going to make you most likely to be able to do so and giving you some anger at stages. We just thought this card was really neat and worth at least allowing to be played. In their game, they called it Saiyan Steady Stream. They had some jokes within some of their titles that I think kind of landed a little better maybe in 2014, but so some of those were changed a little bit as they were resurrected into the NZ space. But overall, mechanically, this card has not changed. What do you think about its place within the game, Nick?
Well, so this card is very interesting to me because in the quote unquote standard Saiyan decks, the Trunk Saga, Cell Saga Mastery, I would not play this card. But basically, in all of the unique Saiyan decks, I think this card is great. Obviously, you've already mentioned the Majin Buu Saga. This is obviously an auto include in those decks. Those decks are great. The prevention deck that we kind of have gotten into recently in NZ6. This card is great in that deck. This card works out really well in the ally deck. It's a good way to drain stages off yourself to open up the ability to use your allies. This is actually the card that showed me that the original Teamwork Mastery was broken because this card could be fetched up and just drain yourself of 6 really easy, kind of like a lot of people do with Tian's Tri-Beam, except it's also a Saiyan style card. So it's easier to get your hands on it. It also has endurance. It does not remove itself from the game, which is more notable than you might think. And even if you look at the Saiyan Lineage Mastery, this gets a damage buff +1/+1. So energy
Yep.
for 4 3 times is a good card, like just a quality
And 3
card.
stages.
Yep. So there's absolutely like if I'm, basically every deck except for the draw card Saiyan decks, the Cell and Trunk Saga Mastery decks, you're gonna want this. This card is very strong. All of its effects are very good. It enables a lot of different things in a lot of different decks, which is cool. It's got a lot of versatility to it. I really like this card. I do think that it's probably low A tier, maybe high B tier, but I think for the decks that want it, which are a lot of decks, it's very strong effects.
Yeah, I think so too. Um, Retro dudes, if any of you stumble upon this video and happen to be like, "Hey, I know that card," you guys did a good thing. This is a really cool card. It it's really interesting, and it's a super cool way to stay like on theme with what Saiyan does of having the larger action economy than most decks, but in doing it in a fair way. 3/3/3 is like not a damage number that you're going to like make people cry about or anything. It's not a nothing damage. It's still like 9 damage is still 9 damage. That's still pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not gonna like blow any doors down or anything. So I think it's just a super fair, strong, interesting card. A feels right to me too. I can see maybe being B because, um, as we know, energy attacks are like kind of tough. Period. And getting to have the stages to be able to do 3 of them can be like really hard. Sometimes you can do this like one time for 3 life and then get physical to 0 and never have stages left to do any attack the rest of the turn.
Mm-hmm.
So like maybe that makes it a B. I don't know. I think you're probably right at like high B is probably the fairest spot for me.
I do think that the decks that want this are going to have other ways to perform attacks. They're
Oh,
going to
for
have
sure, for
allies.
sure.
They're going to be gaining stages and anger with other effects. They're probably going to have Pycons like catches and effects like that a lot of the time.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
you're going to get to do 3 attacks with this more often than you think. And
Yeah.
any kind of modifier obviously is great with this. It has a lot of versatility. It does a lot of cool things.
Yeah. You think that pushes it up to A?
I do
Or do
think
you
that probably pushes it up to A. I think
think-
it sees, yeah, like I said, it sees a lot of play, man. I mean, it's a very
I'm
solid
fine with it.
effect.
Then we've got Saiyan Riposte. Now, this card is not strictly a retro card, but retro did create some cards within their virtual sets that did this sort of thing where they were card that then attaches to bad mastery and makes bad mastery somewhat less bad. Like that was like a little sort of like half cycle that they did within their set, and uh, not every color got one, but I think that like there are things that every color kind of could get. And I think that this one, World Game Saga Mastery, as anyone who's played even Vanilla Score knows, is like hands down the worst Saiyan style mastery. Um, and this is at least designed to buff that up a little bit. Now it is a non-combat, but when entering combat, attach this card to your World Game Saga Saiyan style mastery. While attached, when you reveal a Saiyan style card with your mastery, prevent all damage from the first unstopped attack performed against you that combat. Each time you prevent damage from an attack, the next Saiyan style attack you perform that combat deals that much additional damage. You may only have one Saiyan Riposte attached at a time. So, right off rip, I mean, it is a non, so it's like slow in that sense, but it does trigger when you enter combat, so you get it right away. You don't have to like hope that it doesn't get pinged by your opponent. So that's good. They can't like West Kai it off the table or something before you get a chance to use it. Now, of course, West Kai can still West Kai it, but um, uh, you at least have a chance to get this off before anything can happen to it. And then the prevention itself, that's something that like NZ has really like leaned into. We've worked on building this Saiyan prevention archetype that like really didn't exist before, and this map really like wants you to try to do it, but they didn't give you the cards to like make that happen. And we've really tried to build that as the sets have gone on. Um, Nick, what do you think? I know you've used this card. You have been around this card a ton. What are your thoughts?
So one thing about this that I really like is it's first unstopped attack performed against you that combat, not first attack. So
Yeah,
if your opponent plays a focused attack, usually would just make your World Games Mastery not do anything. However, because it says unstopped, if you are able to stop their focused attack and then their next attack is not focused, now you can prevent the damage from that attack. So there is a lot of it's going to trigger a lot more often than it probably should quote unquote trigger, which is great. The when
yeah,
entering combat attaching is great too because as you know, stuff like this, you put this into play, it immediately has a target on its head. Your opponent's trying to get rid of it. It is a little bit harder to get rid of nons that are attached, which is always nice, and they're not affected by things like City and Turmoil, which sees a ton of play, obviously. So also, the boost is the big part to me. Each time you prevent damage, the next Saiyan style attack deals that much extra. That's endurance. That's all the prevention effects. There's so many ways now in Saiyan to prevent damage, and in this deck, the deck with this mastery, will be preventing a lot of damage. So
yeah,
the attacks that you play aren't that important because it doesn't really matter what they do. They're going to get a buff. They're going to get a buff
yeah,
from this and some of the cards you see later on, and so this kind of makes up for the fact that you're probably playing some weaker cards in order to get your effects to go off, but it doesn't matter if they're doing 4 or 5 additional life cards because of this effect.
yep. Completely agree. Uh, where do you think that places it in the tiers?
Well, these kind of cards are interesting, right? Because for what it wants to do, I think it's like an A tier card. But it being as super narrow as it is, you have to play it in exactly one deck with exactly one mastery. Probably means we should call it a B tier card. I do think that this is the reason to play that card, that mastery. I
Yeah,
think this is the reason to play the prevention deck. I think this is obviously a staple, and you're going to actively look for ways to get this attached early and keep it attached as long as you can.
yeah. I think that's kind of right where I am too. I think that like that's something we definitely have to consider. I guess would kind of placing this type of card on these tier lists or whatever. Every color has one of these, as I kind of already mentioned, and they all are this sort of, this is a card that attaches to a card that is bad, or at least in a lot of cases less good than other options, sometimes just flat out bad. So that already means that you've built a deck around being like bad to begin with that you then have to like make better. So that just in general has to pull it down into a space that like just makes it a worse deck than something that is just flat good to begin with. But I think once you set things up, this card does so much for the deck that wants to play it. I think as narrow as it is, I don't think it's like D or C or tier or anything like that. I think this is probably a pretty firm B for me, at least. I think, Nick, you're right that it's like within the deck that cares, it's probably A tier. But I just think the number of times that a deck cares or whatever is narrow enough that it has to be dropped a little bit.
Makes perfect sense.
And I think that's like that makes sense too. I think when you look at like the other cards we've picked or whatever, like I don't think if you were to just say this card is the same ranking as Saiyan Execution, like I don't think that this has like that kind of general applicability. Or even like either of the masteries. Both of like all of these kind of cards are like unique builds or whatever, but this one is really a specific thing. It's really trying to do something in a deck that only cares about this card.
Yeah.
It makes that deck a lot better. Don't get me wrong, but and then even the newest NZ set with tech support, letting you play a card that can search your deck for a card that can attach and then attaching it, powers this card up a ton too.
Absolutely.
But I think it still kind of falls into that range of like if we're just talking, even if we're just talking like the Saiyan card pool period, there are other things that are just obviously better than the situations that this has to be in for it to be good. So I think B is a pretty safe spot for it. Saiyan Best Friends Drill. I'll read this one here. Prevent 2 power stages of damage from your opponent's physical attacks and 2 life cards of damage from their energy attacks. When entering combat, choose an ally you have in play. The chosen ally may take control of combat regardless of your MP stages above 0 for the remainder of combat. What do you think, Nick?
Well, obviously the first thing that comes to mind is the prevention deck. This prevents damage from all attacks. It prevents damage from focused attacks because it specifies physical and energy separately, which is great. So it's going to trigger all of your stuff that cares about prevention, which is always nice. The second part of the ability, choosing the ally in play, this is a very good way to fuse. This is what I've seen this drill used for the most, is to put Gogeta into play, and Gogeta is quite strong. Otherwise, I mean, having another ally in control of combat, you get to choose who it is every combat. So, if you're if you're entering combat with all attacks and you need somebody that can maybe has a block, you could choose them. It gives you a lot of flexibility with who you choose each combat. And if you're in the ally deck, this is going to be a drill you're interested in. If you're in the prevention deck, this is going to be a drill you're interested in. If you're trying to fuse, it's going to be a drill that you're interested in. So there's a lot of different ways that this card can see play. So I think the flexibility is important. I still think it's probably around a B tier card overall, but you got anything else you want to add?
No, I really think you nailed this one like right on the head. We were making kind of a joke about this one internally that this card like might as well be called Gogeta button drill because like most of the time it's get yourself a Goku or Vegeta, the ones that create Gogeta, and then enter combat, use this effect, fuse them, become Gogeta. And that is used a ton, and that is very, very effective. And so I think that is, I think that's just like a huge merit for it. Making fusion good as like a concept period is always impressive, as we know that is not a typically mechanically impressive feat.
Mm-hmm.
So just making that good off rip is like points it should be congratulated for a period. But I think you're probably right that it's B is like a good firm spot for it. Just like the last card, it's really good in the decks that care, but the decks that care are kind of narrow, and It's not going to go into like your average, your any your Broly Saiyan deck or whatever, your Cell Saiyan, like any of that sort of stuff that's just going to like draw a bunch of cards and punch you. This deck isn't going to play that.
Yep.
But the decks that care will enjoy this card enough that I think it's got enough pluses going for it that it's not like junk or anything. I think it's in the middle of the road, just because of its sometimes undesirability.
Mhm.
So B feels right to me too. I think B is a good firm spot for that. Both of those cards, Riposte and this one, also both from the same set. I think they both kind of feel very similar in their situations where it feels great, situations where it doesn't.
Sure.
Saiyan Charged Impact, another card from the same set, is an Endurance 2 focused energy attack doing 5 life cards of damage. If you declared a Tokuiwaza, raise your anger 1 and prevent 2 power stages of damage from your opponent's attacks for the remainder of combat. So not just your next attack, not just their next attack, but all of their attacks, assuming of course they're not focused or whatever. But you're just getting 2 free prevented damage off of every attack. An energy that's focused is always cool. 5 life cards is it's like the good, nice number on a card because unenduranced, that's enough to capture a ball, stuff like that. Getting the anger gain on it is awesome. So it'll feel good in the decks that want to care about that. Mabu Saga, things like that. Overall, I think this card is like pretty solid. The Endurance 2 is not to be forgotten. Plus, even just using this as the Endurance 2, if it gets hit from your deck, makes your next attack do 2 extra damage off of the drill. Off of Riposte, like we were talking about before.
Yep.
Combat. That's not something to ignore. I think there's a lot of like little things about this card that kind of combined together make it a more impressive card than it kind of just surface reads.
Yeah, like overall, its effects are all pretty generic and straightforward, and they all kind of go together really well. The Endurance 2 plus the Prevent 2 stages, both of those obviously play well into the Prevention deck. Also, just preventing 2 stages of damage plays really well into energy decks. Energy decks are always trying to keep their stages, and anytime you can prevent stages, that's very beneficial. The anger gain again is really good for the Buu Saga, the deck that is usually an energy based deck. So I mean that deck's gonna love this card. You can't underrate the value of focused abilities too. Focused energies are great. Out just as a general rule, people do not play a lot of focused energy blocks. They play physical blocks and they play omni blocks. You don't, maybe 2 to 3 energy blocks in a normal deck. So this is going to hit a good percentage of the time. You're going to get your damage in. Like I said, it's a bunch of, kind of just average level effects that all added up together make a pretty solid overall card.
Yeah, I think so too. What do you think that rates it?
I think it's probably B because it's just middle of the line. Like I said, everything about this card is fine. You're gonna be fine to play this card. You're never gonna, if you draw this card into your hand, no matter really what your situation is, you're gonna be okay with it. You lead off to prevent if you don't have enough block, or if you do have some blocks, then a focused energy attack, like I said, is gonna get through the damage. So I think it's solid B tier card. It really solid effects all the way around. Nothing to jump out crazy about, but real solid.
Yep, that's exactly where I'm at too. For me, I think like if I were to just like have to rank within a block, I think it comes kind of like right before the kind of Riposte saying best friends sort of slot. Not that these like rows are ranked or anything. We've just been sticking them at the end. But this one, like really for me, feels like just a touch better than these two. They all kind of have that same situation of like they're really good in the thing that they care about, the sometimes that it cares about them.
Mm-hmm.
So they all sort of fit that same like point bracket spot. But I think this one just being an attack flat like already makes it a little bit more valuable than a non or a drill. Both things that are like easier to deal with than like an energy attack. Like Nick mentioned, there are a lot less energy blocks within a deck, especially ones that can stop focused energy attacks. Um, so I think it's just a touch better than those two in that regard, but I think it's still kind of in that same general point space. we get down to our final three here. Saiyan covering fire. What does this card do, Nick?
Alright, so it is Saiyan Heritage only, like many of these cards. Energy attack, raise your anger 1. It has Empower 3. If it's not empowered, this card stays to be on the table to use one more time this combat, and when it's used for a second time, it reads Prevent all damage from an opponent's attack, raise your anger 1. Removed from the game after use. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, off rip, kind of like we had mentioned the first time, energy for 7. If you have to use it that way, is cool. Saiyan Heritage only makes it fetchable, which is neat if you need it to be. Anger on an energy is cool. Energy decks will like leveling because that's fresh sets of stages. So this fits really great into that. But getting to be used one extra time, but the second time it's a block, or well, block in air quotes, is cool. Some things that are kind of some puzzle pieces you have to put together. If you play this with riposte attached, then it's an energy that raises your anger. Then it becomes a prevent all damage from the next attack, and then you get to do all that extra damage on your next attack. It gives you some more anger too, so potentially this is a 2 anger card, which is another situation to push yourself to leveling to get yourself some fresh stages for more energies, or just for keeping your life up in general. The prevention deck loves leveling too, where it can, because that's just more stages of damage you can take before taking life cards, so that's good. It likes leveling a little less since you kind of want to set up some of these drills, but as we've seen from like the new Raditz that just came out in NZ6, some of that stuff matters a little bit less for him, and he just likes to just sit there at level 1 and build that thing up. Anger would not be as great with with him because his 2 is so much worse. But cards like this that just let you build, like they just give you versatility in like they do something and then do something else that is as cool or better in their own way. I think is awesome. They fit the mold of Saiyan having action economy, and the toolbox that Saiyan gets because of some of these cards is great. I think this is one that slots right into a ton of decks. 1 energy attack is not something that's even gonna like break the back of a physical deck or something, and then getting a block off of an attack is pretty cool too.
Yeah, so any of your standard Saiyan decks that are fetchable, the Goku Young Agains, the Brolys, they're all going to play this card. Your energy decks are going to play this card. Your Buu Saga Mastery decks are going to play this card. Your prevention decks are going to play this card. It'd be easier to list off the things that don't want it versus the things that do. The card's versatility is obviously quite strong, and even if you're low on stages, you enter with this card and you're just going to lead with it, and then it's going to set in play, and you're going to have that kind of in your back pocket in case your opponent, plays something that, all right, well, I can't afford to take that. I can prevent it now, and so if you are not big on anger, which I know that a couple, like you were talking about the Raditz deck that's kind of camp level 1, you just put it into play, and there's something called threat of activation. It sits there, and if your opponent only has 1 or 2 attacks, they may just pass because they know that they're going to waste their cards into this, and
Yep.
that is alone is powerful effect. Where do you think this card ranks out?
To me, I think this is better than like any of the B cards that we've just been talking about. Like you said, almost every deck that I can think of will want at least a copy or 2 of this. Maybe not the full 3 of or something, but I think there's a ton of decks that are just going to play this and grab it when they want to. Even if you're just playing like 1 of it in Broly or something and can grab it when you want to be able to throw an attack and block something, is really not something to ignore. I think it's A.
Yep, I agree. I would play this deck in basically everything except for the stage lock sand deck, and that's 1 deck. So I think it's great. A is definitely makes sense to me.
Yeah, I think A makes a lot of sense. I might even put it like I might argue that it's like up here with execution. I think there's 90% of sand decks I want to play this in,
Hmm.
and all of those decks I love having it in.
Yep, and yeah,
So
that's
yeah,
exactly how I feel about execution too. They're in the same exact boat to me. Those cards are both very powerful.
yep. All right, into NZ6, our 2 newest released cards here. Just what 10, 20 days old now? 19 days it looks like. so they haven't seen a ton of use within the kind of competitive circuit yet, but they are already uh, showing their worth. The Saiyan battle armor here has resist. Quick recap for anyone who is new or even within the league and hasn't looked too much at the NZ6 cards. Resist is when a card with resist is played, or when it gains resist, it gets a resist token. Um, when this card would be discarded or removed from the game, you remove the resist token instead. So it basically means that it has to be removed twice to be able to to get rid of it. So it just makes them a little bit stickier than your regular standard standard drill or whatever. That you just have to hit the one time and send it on its way. In this case, you have to have your opponent burn their entire West guy. They have to do 2 it's worth of removal on it, things like that. So that's good off rip. Then it stops the physical or energy attack. It is a non-combat, so you play this, sits on table. So it's a block. You don't have to draw that combat. For the remainder of combat, prevent 2 power stages and 2 life cards of damage from your opponent's attacks. If you declare Tokawaza, you may remove 3 Saint style cards in your discard pile from the game to shuffle this card into your life deck after use. Nick, you are the sort of converted champion on this card. What do you think?
So I love this card. Obviously, resist is super strong. So when you look at what this card does as a base, stops a physical or energy attack as a non-combat. It flashes back to like Piccolo's Flight. The problem I've always had with Piccolo's Flight is that a lot of card effects that your opponents have will discard a non, and then you can't use your Piccolo's Flight. So that attack kind of gets through your non and something else. So resist kind of prevents that, right? So if they have an effect that discards a non-combat on their attack, all they're going to hit is the resist counter, and then you can still use this to stop their attack. So it's still going to trade 1-for-1 with those kind of effects, which is always great. The prevent stages and life cards is obviously strong. I mean, obviously it fits in more with the prevention deck. It's good in the energy deck. Basically, the decks that aren't super aggressive are going to love this card. It's it'll set and play until you need it. The resist counter makes it stick in play. Your opponent's not generally going to waste card effects to try to get rid of this card because it's just too much trouble. And then if you declare Tokawaza, remove the 3 Sandstyle cards and shuffle it back in. Just helps you draw it a little more often. Just keeps it in play. You'll notice too that if you try the Raditz deck with this card, Raditz lets you search for this anytime you search for a drill, so you can shuffle it back in and immediately get it back, place it back into play. This card effect is way stronger than I initially thought it was going to be. With the drill that you'll see shortly paired with it that came out in the same set, it lets you stop focused attacks and prevent damage, and and you can put it back in. I think this card is incredibly strong. I think it's an A tier card. I think you could argue that it's B tier because it is a non-combat, and it does have some minor drawbacks related to that. But in the decks that want it, it's very strong, and in the deck where I think it was kind of designed for, it's one of the best cards in the deck, if not the best card in the deck.
Yeah, that's kind of exactly where I am. I think it's really, it's definitely sort of like mostly deck locked to the one that it is designed for, but it is the MVP of that deck for sure. And I think like when you think about its sort of placement, like within the tiers and stuff, when I look at like the other things that I've given B or A to within this list, I think that I like this card and what it does more than I like just like how generically good rapid fire is. I know,
Absolutely.
like in theory, I think maybe rapid fire is like maybe that puts it better, quote unquote, on a tier list. I don't know, just because you can use it like more often or whatever. But the deck that like wants this card, or the couple decks that want this, absolutely love it. I think it's so easy to dismiss. Oh, it's just a block or whatever. But it's not. It's a block you don't have to have in your hand, so you don't have to draw it. You don't have to hope you pulled it when your opponent enters. You can just have it on the table to use it whenever you need it. It has resist, which means your opponent isn't going. So it has resist and is a card that you're going to discard on your own to use its effect, which means your opponent isn't going to want to burn 2 removal effects on a thing that you're going to pop on your own.
Mm.
It makes sense to like use 2 removals on a drill or something that's just going to like sit there and like keep being used. But this is a card that I'm going to activate and discard from play without you even touching it. So it sucks to have to be like, all right, I guess I'm going to use 2 removals on a card that like next action you might have just removed on your own anyway. So this card sticks around way longer than you might think that it would. And when you get to use it, the situations where you like decide that this is the block that's worth using, even if you have like, just the merit of like having a block when you need it is good. But even if you have other blocks, there are certain times where this one is like, now this is it. This is the one I'm going to prevent a bunch of damage from the rest of attacks. Used with riposte, that means that all those attacks are going to do more each attack for the rest of the turn. That's awesome. Getting it back is great. I just think I think this card's great. I think I like it better than any of the stuff I have in B. I think it's easily an A tier card for me.
Oh, yep, sounds good. I'm on board. It is
Cool.
one of the big 1-2 punch of the prevention deck for sure.
Absolutely. And here if that's the left jab, this is the right hook. Saiyan Flexibility Drill, the final card on our list, the final Saiyan card released in NZ6. It has resist as well, like the last card. Your Saiyan style cards that can stop attacks or prevent damage can stop and prevent damage from focused attacks. When you stop an attack or prevent damage with a Saiyan style card, gain 2 power stages, and the next Saiyan style attack you perform does +2 life cards of damage. Nick, what do you think?
So the important thing to note with this is that you do not have to play anything in your deck that prevents damage for this card to be good. Most of, like we said with Saiyan cross block, most of the good Saiyan blocks are Omni blocks, and Omni blocks cannot stop focused attacks. So with this drill in play, all of your blocks can stop everything, and every time you stop one, you're going to gain some stages. Your next attack is going to do more life cards. I think this drill is absurdly powerful. Obviously, resist makes it stick a little better, which is always great. But basically, if you are not intending to level, I think this card is great and should be in your deck. I don't think that it's quite started seeing play yet like it should, but I do think that when people have actually got to play with this card, they'll realize what all it can do. Especially now, if you're talking about the prevention deck, it's in specific. This works with endurance. This works with any kind of Saiyan style effects are great for this. You're just going to end up getting in a lot of spots where your next attack does +6 or +8 life cards, and so it doesn't matter if your attack's a little unpowered because you're on this theme of prevention. So yeah, maybe your attack's only like a +3, but if it's +3 stages and +8 life cards, that's a really strong effect. And the
Yeah.
ability to prevent damage with this, if you prevent partial damage with best friends drill or with the something like that, and then also with endurance on the same attack, it's going to trigger twice because you're using 2 different effects. So you're going to stack this +2 life cards, and it's going to end up shelling out some real damage a good percentage of the time.
Yep. 100%. And I think even if you like aren't doing that, even if this is just sit on the table and you block an attack, uh, you get stages, do a couple more damage. Something that I've kind of mentioned with this before is that it basically turns every block that you play into making your next energy attack free, which is awesome. Energy decks, as we've talked about, have trouble keeping themselves in the game. This lets a Saiyan deck do that a little better. I just think, just like body armor, this card is fantastic in every case that it is. I think unless you are a deck that, like Nick said, that is intentionally just trying to like rush through stages or through levels, this one is awesome. And even if you're like a deck, shout out Kevin, you do this a lot, where you like try to get to 3 or 4 or something, and then sit there and then like set up some drills and stuff. That's not a particularly common play style for a lot of people, but Kevin within the league here does that incredibly well. And I think even in those decks, this card is good, where you'll just rush to a good level and then sit there and then set up yourself. This card is still good in that.
Yeah,
I think this card just overall just just great.
Yeah, and this could be, when I look at this, I'm seeing like a settle down type effect too. Like let's get to level 2, the good Vegeta settle down level 2, and then stay there, and then put this into play, and you're gonna get all the buffs from him, all the buffs from the drill. This will give you a reason to camp specific levels and specific decks. I think this card is, like I said, really powerful overall. Where would you put it as far as the tier list goes?
I think this card is as body armor.
Yep.
To be honest, I might almost even think this is like even a little better because there's just sometimes like I mean this just sticks around longer and is cooler longer, you know.
Yep.
Battle armor, I think, being like a straight block on its own, has more merit than like a card that just makes blocks better per se. But this affects more cards longer, um, and goes really well with the card that we just said is great. I think that just in general means it has to be pretty good. I think it's at least as A tier as body armor, if not more.
Yeah, yeah, and again, the two of them playing together at Best Friends Drill is part of that package too. Like this is
Yeah.
a good package of cards that will hopefully is going to make this underplayed mastery stand out a little more. And like I said, this card is just generically good in basically every deck that's not going to level you off of it immediately. So
Yep. Yeah, I think this last few like NZ released cards, flexibility drill, battle armor, covering fire, even charged impact kind of too, best friends drill riposte. Um all like starting with riposte to the end of everything NZ has released recently, that whole package of cards, plus now Raditz too,
mhm.
um just like creates a really cool Saiyan World Game Saga deck that absolutely didn't exist before. And does things in a way that Saiyan decks absolutely do not do. And so it's really fun, it's really unique, and it's turns out quite strong. So I think it's awesome. I think this card is complete A. Maybe right here before Battle Armor for me. I
Sure.
think this is kind of I think this is what I think. Nick, is there anything now that we have everything slapped on the table here that you just feels out of place?
No, I don't really think so. Pretty on point with this, especially the S tier cards. I think they kind of stand out. All of the A
Yeah,
tier cards are super strong in multiple archetypes basically, and then you move to B tier where they're super strong in one archetype or they're generically strong overall. And of course the three at the bottom down there doing their thing. So
yeah. I think like maybe this deck or maybe this tier list or whatever is a little like top heavy, but that like sort of makes sense, right? In a world where we are like intentionally creating cards, there aren't going to be too many that are like purposely not good, you know.
yeah,
So a lot of them like will just be higher on this list overall. But I think that doing this kind of thing, for anyone who cared enough to stick around, thank you. I know we're pushing like 2 hours into this video now, so thanks for that. There's a lot of content here, but I think doing things like this helps legitimize the sort of like existence of these cards within the pool. It opens people's eyes maybe to some of these cards that they haven't really looked at. There are a lot of people, even in the league, who like play actively, who are aware of some of these cards because like other people use them, and they'll like maybe put negation into their deck or cross block because like they're just obviously good. But like some of these B's and C's or what even lower A's, like just I kind of looked at this once, thought nothing of it, and like moved on. I think paying attention to something like this gives us an opportunity to really drill into why some of these cards are as cool as we at least feel like they are. Um, and this isn't just dev team thinks a card's cool. Look at it, please. I think like especially like Nick is I mean he tested it or whatever, but like the devs or whatever, he's like kind of firsthand player, not like experience with this. Some of these cards, like you really have to try them to really feel it. Sand Battle Armor is a great example of a card that doesn't, when you just read it, feel like it'd be like that, like it would have that much wow factor, like it would be an A tier card. If I just read this effect off rip, thought nothing of it, I might say like B or C. Um, but like when you see it in practice in the setting it's supposed to be in, like you can really see some of the like wow factor that it presents. And a lot of these cards are that way. But overall, I think that's what I'm going to call the NZ Saiyan card pool tier list. And thanks again, everyone, for coming along for this long of a ride. If there's anyone still here, I don't know, comment Gregory in the comments or something, and I'll get a chuckle. You won't win any prizes, but I'll smile. That should matter enough. Stay tuned, though. We'll have more of these. We intend to do one of these for each style. Cover the freestyle cards, cover the MPs. We've even kind of talked about just doing like the NZ sets, like period. There are only 6 of those, so that's like a smaller video, kind of in general. But Saiyan just made a lot of sense as a good start. Some of the cards are like real obvious on what they do. They just sort of fit right into the slots they kind of hone into. There doesn't have to be a lot of debate about like I like this card. Well, I don't. A lot of the cards are just kind of like generically good where they belong. So it's a good, easy first one to start with. Nick, do you have any closing statement for us here?
Not really. I agree with pretty much everything you said there. A big thing for people checking out these cards is, you gotta really pay attention to what a card can do. When they spoiled Battle Armor and Flexibility Drill, I was like, oh, these cards are terrible. And then I was like, you know what? I'm gonna give them a shot. I'm gonna play this Prevention deck, and I was like, holy crap, these cards are way better than I thought they were. So there's sometimes you can find hidden gems, and again, these lists are always going to be a little top heavy because we're not building cards for limited formats, right? So we don't need commons to fill space. We can
Yeah.
print cards that are useful at least in some ways.
Yeah. Yeah, we're just printing rares,
Yep.
So yeah, we don't have to have some of the bottom of the barrel chaff that you get in like a regular color pie tier list, but um, I'm pretty happy with where this one landed. All of this feels right.
I'm with you.
Well, until next time, friends. Adios.